Today we start in chapter 6 of Daniel, and Daniel is serving now under his third king. He began with Nebuchadnezzar, he served under Belshazzar, now he's serving under Darius. And that's because the Medes and Persians, which was a cooperative effort against the Babylonians, the Medes were north of Babylon, the Persians east, they joined together to overthrow the Babylonians, and Darius is now the king. So Darius does something governmentally. He sets up 120 governors throughout all the regions of the empire. There are 3 people that govern those governors. One of those 3 people is Daniel. So Daniel would be over 40 different governors, and the governors and the people alongside Daniel, the other 2, conspired against Daniel. They were jealous of him. They were jealous of his success, jealous of his favor, jealous of what he was able to accomplish, and maybe they were just racist, because Daniel, of course, is Jewish and he's not Babylonian or Persian. So maybe that came into play. We don't know. But we do know that they were jealous. And so they looked for a way to accuse him before the king. They conspired against him, and the only thing that they could find is in verse 5. I love this. These men said, "We shall not find any charge against this Daniel unless we find it against him concerning the law of his God." Well, that's quite a testimony. So when we are in the world but not of the world, people should know. And I don't know how long it took them to figure this out, but somewhere along the line they figured out that Daniel was faithful to his God. Now, probably one of the ways that they found out is that Daniel prayed 3 times a day. So he probably, if there was a meeting to attend, he would have to delay the meeting because he was in prayer. Perhaps he had to leave meetings early to go to his prayer time. And whenever we do that, it's like structuring your life around the core principles of your Christianity. So imagine that you have these core principles and they're non-negotiables. They're structures right in the middle of your moral life, and everything else is built around that centerpiece. So it seems like that's probably the case with Daniel, and it was probably those prayer times that gave him away. But he was unashamed of it, and so whatever it took, he was going to arrange his schedule, arrange his life, arrange his meetings, arrange his relationships around the centerpiece of his life, which was God and His Word. Well, and that's what it means to be in the world but not of the world. Now, it says something else in this passage that I find fascinating. I'm going to call it the 3 elements of favor, the favor of God. Some people believe the favor of God is like pixie dust, that God just sprinkles over you and you can act any way you want to, and somehow the favor of God just overcomes all of your foolishness and gets you what you want. And that's not what the favor of God is. The favor of God is laid out in front of us and gives us an opportunity to live a certain way that is the best way to live to optimize the blessings of God if you live that way. So God lays out principles, and well, you can live by those principles, and if you live in those principles, you'll have favor. If you decide not to live in those principles, you won't have favor. So the favor of God is not pixie dust. It is a set of principles that we live by, and there's 3 of them here. That's really important in this passage. So if you look at the text, the first one is in verse 3, where it says that Daniel distinguished himself above the governors and satraps because of an excellent spirit. Okay, so let's just talk about excellence. I think that's the first thing that brings the favor of God, a spirit of excellence. And what does that mean exactly? It means that everything you do to the best of your ability. You do with excellence. If you are a plumber, well, learn how to be an excellent plumber and apply yourself with excellence to do that job for your customers the absolute best that you possibly can. If you're a writer, apply yourself, get the education necessary, take the courses necessary, meet the people who can mentor you, find those people. I don't know where they are. You find those people. You do what you can to be excellent at what you do. There are no half-hearted Christians giving a half effort in the job that will ever have the favor of God on them. Whatever you do, do with a spirit of excellence. That's the first ingredient to the favor of God that we see here with Daniel. The second one is in verse 4. At the end, it says, but they could find no charge or fault because he was, here's number 2, faithful. Daniel was faithful. That just means the second quality of someone that lives a blessed life in the favor of God is you're faithful. That means when you say you're going to do something, do it, complete it to the absolute best of your abilities. And obviously there's times where we say we're going to do something and the extenuating circumstances keep us from accomplishing that. And that happens, but that's the exception, not the rule. And there are people that live in that rule. It's almost like everything they start, they quit. Whether it's to remodel a room, whether it's going to clean the garage, they start in school, they end up dropping out, they join some club, they go for a little while and they drop out and they move on to something else. And when that becomes a lifestyle, what you'll find is you never complete anything because you lack the faithfulness that it takes to complete it. And sometimes it's not even what you're completing that matters, but that you're completing something that matters. Because in order to complete something, to be faithful, you have to set a goal and you have to discipline yourself to reach that goal. And once your life starts creating a pattern where you set goals and you're okay with not achieving them. So you set another goal, you're okay with not achieving that. So you set another goal and you're okay with not achieving that. You find out that you lack the faithfulness over time to walk in the favor of God. And it's not God's fault. We have to, first of all, have a spirit of excellence. Secondly, we have to be faithful. And here's the third quality of the favor of God. It's found in the same verse right at the end. Verse 4, nor was there any error or fault in him. Well, what's that mean? That means that he had a moral standard that he lived by, and he lived by it. He had a moral framework, and he lived by it. And that's all part of this thing where they looked at Daniel's life and they said, well, the only thing that we can accuse him of is he's really dedicated to his God. Like, man, he prays. He's got these 3 times a day where he prays. And so maybe we can trick Darius into signing a decree that cannot be overturned, that for 30 days, if anyone asks of any God or any human being any petition other than asking the king, we'll throw them to the lions. Yeah, that's what we'll do because we know that we'll get Daniel with this, because they knew that Daniel had a moral framework built around God and His Word. And we have to have a moral hierarchy. We have to have ethics that we live by. And you can't expect to walk in the favor of God if you're constantly sacrificing your efforts to achieve something in the temporary, where you are lowering your moral standards because maybe you feel like the means justifies the ends, or immediate gratification with something, and so you'll tweak your moral standard. You'll kind of reinvent yourself and your ethical standards because you want that gratification immediately. And when you live that way, you're constantly bending the strength of your moral framework to the point that you'll stress it out, it'll collapse. And then, of course, maybe we're going to repent and come back to God and the collapse won't be that great, or maybe that collapse will ruin your life, ruin your marriage, ruin your family. Maybe that collapse is something that you'll never fully recover from. So what do? Well, you read the Word, you build that framework, and you live by it. And that's how you live in the favor of God.